Welcome to Learn to Live Stress-Free. This is Christine Wright with Dr. Robert Wright Jr., your go-to wellness coaches of StressFreeNow.info. Our featured guest today is Allison Morgan, speaking on Zensational Kids in Action. Hi, Allison. Welcome back. We are so happy to have you here again today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me again. This is such a treat for me.
Allison, on the last time you visited with us, that you said so many amazing things, and I know that our audience is going to be thrilled that we had you back. You were an example of the type of guest that people say to us, this guest you had was fabulous. Can you have them on again? I'm curious to see what his or her perspective is on this. So I know there are people who are teachers out there that heard your message, and they would have been heartened by what you said. So I know people will be waiting with bated breath to hear what you have to say today. So on that note, Allison, I want to ask you, you've written a children's book entitled Wisdom Within. Can you tell our audience how you came to write that book and what it's about?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for asking. Not that many people ask me about why I wrote that book. I use it as...
I just want to cut you off there and just mention this aspect. When you consider how much time, effort, and energy a person like yourself has taken to write a book,
yeah,
isn't it, I'm hesitant to use the word that it's a shame, but it really is that you have so much meat and other people have taken the time to share their wisdom that people can benefit. So I think that it's really important to just say, hey, listen, there are people out here doing really good work like Allison, and more people need to be asking you. So, Allison, tell us about your book. How did you come to write this thing? Give us the skinny.
Thanks for asking. How did I come to write this book? The storyline of the book really came to me after a meditation, and I think that it came to me because I'm so entrenched in working with children and working with them in a holistic way and looking at child development not only from the standpoint of what's happening cognitively and physically and sensorially and emotionally, but what's sort of happening spiritually and deep within the individual. And trying to find ways to express that are sometimes a little bit challenging for an adult. Kids really could express it very, very easily. But it came to me as a meditation in terms of we're all born with this essence of knowledge and of goodness and of intuition and of knowing our deep purpose for being here, not just in this physical body, but as spiritual beings. Kids are much closer to this knowing than adults are. But how can we help ourselves and our kids hold on to that inner knowing that you have a purpose here. You are needed here. You are special, and there is goodness within you. And how do we hold on to that? So this story sort of came to me in a meditation, and I just started writing it down. And then after I wrote it all down, I said, all right, how am I going to, explain this to kids? And I put it into this rhyming kind of thing where the basis of the story is that every living thing knows its purpose, and it doesn't learn it. It doesn't go to school to learn it. So, for example, a caterpillar knows how to turn into a butterfly. It's ingrained in its DNA. How do I do it? Birds know how to fly. They don't go for flying lessons. Spiders know how to spin webs. These are all things that these creatures know within them. Okay, but we're part of nature too. So what is it that we know that we don't have to be taught. Like when we're very, very young, we know these things, and really our development is about cultivating what we already know. And that's about our core qualities of goodness, of kindness, of compassion, of gratitude, of sharing. We are born with this in our DNA. And what's really cool is there's been studies to prove this. There was a huge study at University of Wisconsin, and they have charted that kids as young as 6 months old look for the good in other people and move away from negative emotion and negative feeling. So they are drawn to what they know, which is the goodness. So the book really is about how do we reconnect to that within ourselves, because when we're young, we come into this body, into this world knowing those things, but yet things happen in our life, like sad things or bad things, and it makes us forget about that goodness sometimes. So
Allison,
the way that we're able to...
I have to jump in here. Can Christine consult with you on this book?
No.
I've known Christine when we were just friends, before we were dating. What you're talking about, that's the place that she lives, with the gratitude, the goodness and kindness. I was saying to myself, and I know people in our audience, at least some will say, I was saying, is Allison saying this? Is she trying to get me to start weeping? Because our society has moved so far to it's almost an opposite paradigm. I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm in the Star Trek episode, the matter versus antimatter. And so the way that you're talking, I mean, I have goosebumps right now, and I'm saying, how come we never met Allison before? We didn't know. I mean, the things that you're saying, this is the kind of message that, I mean, because what you're saying is not even a religious message, it's a spiritual message. You're saying we're beings, that we have this inside of us, and it's innate. And and you're saying it's innate goodness. And so thank you for that. I mean, I can't tell you, you have made my day.
I'm so happy.
Well, thank you for making Bob's day. We'll let you continue, but I, too, as I listen to you, what I wanted to say is, and I believe it's similar to your message, the idea of loving kindness, of our extending ourselves in the world with loving kindness, is a message that really needs to be brought to bear with a larger audience. What you're saying reminds me so much of what neuroscientist Rick Hansen talks about, of looking for the good.
Yes.
And sometimes we forget to listen to little children. The whole thing that we tend to say is, sit down and shut up.
Yeah.
When they have thoughts, they have feelings, they have a message. And if we listen to them, it says, and a child shall lead. So if we listen to them, we can really learn. And we really, sometimes adults forget that.
Yeah, I have to say, all the work that I've been doing over the past 3 decades, the children have been my best teachers for life, of life.
Yes.
Yeah. So what I did with this book is I then added yoga and mindfulness to it, because those are the best ways that I know of how to reconnect to the self-compassion. Like, we need to have self-compassion before we can have compassion for others. How to be grateful for the simple things that we have, so we can cultivate gratitude within ourselves and for what's around us, and how to build kindness. And, when you think about in schools, they have all these anti-bullying programs that are out there that are really about having no tolerance. It's about having consequences for actions and for behavior. But really, at the core, it's about we are all here for good. And to me, bullying is, I forgot I'm good. I forgot. I just forgot. So when we pair yoga and mindfulness, or even using this book, Wisdom Within, it really is a much more effective way of addressing bullying.
Right. And, there's something that I want to mention, and perhaps you can speak to this, having been and still being an occupational therapist and a mindfulness teacher, is that emotions are very powerful feelings, and children don't yet have a logical mind. So they're still in this, that they can easily be overcome by emotions, as unfortunately many adults seem to be too, that to understand how to feel your feelings, allow yourself to feel your feelings, but still have positive behavior even when your feelings are so intense. And I think that's where people get caught up. And if anything needs to be taught or learned, it's that. It's fine to feel, but you want to take a moment before you act on those feelings.
Right. And very often, as adults, we ourselves are afraid to allow ourselves to be okay with the feelings that we have. We think that, like, I'm angry, I'm so mad, but I shouldn't be mad. Like, it's not good to be mad. And the reality is, what you feel, you feel. You have to allow yourself to experience what that emotion is within you in order to then determine what to do about it. The sad thing is that sometimes we just become reactive to, we have this emotion and then we just react immediately. And when it's a negative emotion or a sad or frustrating emotion, that action is usually harmful to ourselves or to somebody else. So helping children acknowledge the emotion, not sweep it under the rug, is really going to empower them to make better decisions regarding the emotions that they have.
Exactly. That's really a great skill to be learned. Now, Allison, in the last time you were with us, you mentioned that you're doing the Zensational Kids program not only throughout the United States but also internationally. How has your program been received here in the U.S. and other places by the people involved, by the students, the parents, the administrators? Has it basically been a positive response, or have you had to bring people on board? Has there been a learning curve with this?
Really, when I'm asked to go to another country with these programs, it's always a very positive one because it's a lot of effort for them to bring me over. So really, whenever I go to another country, everybody's already on board. What I find very interesting is that in other countries that I've visited, they're seeing the same rise in the issues that we're seeing here. It really is a global issue. The mental health issues, the rise in developmental delays or ADHD or autism. Now, some countries maybe not to the same extent, but there is a rise. They are seeing the same types of things.
I can understand that because I think part of it is that many people are still in the level of attachment, and in a way that makes sense. But because of the speed of technology and change, there's constant motion, and we constantly need to move. But our homeostatic systems are not set at the same pace as technology.
Absolutely.
And I think that disconnect is one of the basic causes of people having shorter tempers, being less patient, being less tolerant.
Yeah, and part of that is, and I think you had mentioned this on the first interview that we did, is that we are an information-driven and overloaded society. There's just way too much information out there that we're trying to consume, and our neurology is not designed to handle it all, and we try to cognitively process it all. And in doing so, we become disembodied. We're much more focused on what's happening within the brain and trying to remember things and trying to learn things and trying to organize situations and people and information that we forget about the body. From the neck down, it's like gone. And we are an organism that needs the body probably more than we need the brain.
Well, having come from a dance background myself, I understand that. And what I teach is a quadrant model of body, because you need to make your physical body happy. You need to give it adequate rest, proper nutrition. And you also need to keep your mental body happy. You need to be able to stimulate your mind, relax your mind, what have you. And I separate that from your emotional body because, as we just spoke about, there's a learning curve with that. Have your feelings, but take a moment's break before you act on those feelings, especially if it's something powerful like anger or rage. That especially when you have those, be aware that you're angry, you're in a rage, but just take a moment before you act. Because if you act while you're in that state, you may do something harmful to yourself or someone else.
Right.
And then spiritual, which for some people it is religious, but it may not have to do with a deity or religion. It's simply noticing that you need, as what you're teaching with the mindfulness, you need a moment of quiet. You need a moment to connect with nature, a moment to connect with something or someone outside of yourself and greater than yourself. So if you feed those aspects of your being, at least that's my belief and my practice, that you have a much better chance of, as you have said, that we were meant for good. We were meant to enjoy this life, but we get caught up with the things that don't serve us.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Allison, just listening to you and Christine, this has been so much fun. Audience, we will take a short break and come back on Learn to Live Stress-Free with our featured guest today, Allison Morgan, founder of Zensational Kids. We'll be right back.
Have you been procrastinating about completing an important project or following a treasured dream? Hi, this is Christine Wright. I specialize in helping my coaching clients to lay out clear, goal-achieving strategies. I show you how to quickly build your confidence and uncover and eliminate your habitual patterns of resistance and self-sabotage. Let me help you discover those meaningful insights that will get you to do what works so you can celebrate your successes. Go to stressfreenow.info/contact to let me know that you're curious about how to live your ideal life now. Again, that's stressfreenow.info/contact. Are you dealing with stress, burnout, chronic pain, anxiety, or unresolved grief? Dr. Robert Wright Jr., the Stress Relief Doctor, is an author, speaker, and stress management wellness coach. Co-host of the Learn to Live Stress-Free podcast series, Dr. Bob holds a Ph.D. in Transformative Studies and a master's degree in psychology. He is the author of the first published study to show the connection between stress reduction, grief recovery, and nitric oxide spiking and the relaxation response. He has a wealth of practical knowledge which helps you to relieve the stresses of everyday life so you can live longer and play with your grandchildren. Work with Dr. Bob and he'll give you the tools you need to dissolve your pain points quickly and effectively. Email him to find out how you can start to feel better at stressfreenow.info/contact. That's stressfreenow.info/contact.
Welcome back to Learn to Live Stress-Free as we continue our conversation with our fabulous featured guest today, Allison Morgan, the founder of Zensational Kids. So, Allison, before the break, you spoke about many things, but one of the things that I'm fascinated with is the science part of your message. Can you just go a little bit more for the benefit of our audience, because I know there's still people out there that are skeptical or people that are curious because, as Christine reminds me from time to time, there are many more people who have not heard this information that I know many people are very busy rushing around. Sometimes people tell me that they don't even have time to read in their field. So I believe it would be helpful to our audience or anyone that listens to this podcast message to know a little bit more about the efficacy of the approach that Zensational Kids use, how mindfulness and yoga is efficacious to reduce stress, reduce anxiety, reduce pain, and reduce the feelings of teachers or anyone or parent of the sense of burnout or like they're losing their mind. Because if people are honest with you, you go, "How are you doing today?" So instead of saying "I'm fine," people say, "Oh, I think this is it. I think I've had it."
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've heard this before. I know I read a study that they said that the average teenager today in 24 hours experiences more information than a person who lived in the year 1900.
Yeah.
That they experienced in their entire lifetime. So in 24 hours, a teenager is consuming more information than a person who lived in 1900 did for their entire life. So that speaks to what Christine mentioned before as part of the disconnect. That the human nervous system and neurology has not been able to keep up with the pace of technological change, which has been throughout history a logarithmic increase, and now it's at a super exponential increase. I know I'll get in trouble with my math friends by saying exponential. They're like, Bob, that's not the right math term. they're like, just say exponential, Bob.
Yeah. The way that I really like to explain the science is breaking it up into looking at the science of breath, looking at the science of movement, and looking at the science of mindfulness. So I'll start with breath first, as being this incredible tool that we have that can take us from a stress response to a relaxation response very, very quickly and effectively. In fact, it really only takes about 90 seconds to elicit a relaxation response using your breath in a very directed way. So we all know what it feels like to be stressed, and if you follow your breath when you're in a stressed state, it's usually short, it's shallow, it's mostly in your upper chest region, and the reason for that is that the upper lobes of your lungs are linked to your sympathetic nervous system, which helps perpetuate a stress response. And it's designed really to force you to go into a fight, flight, or freeze state so that you can get out of danger. And like you said before, we have a brain that hasn't evolved enough to handle all of this information that we are bombarded with. So information overload is sort of the equivalent to a caveman being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. So it is an immediate stressor that causes you to...
Can you say that again, Allison? I think that bears repeating. People, they're wondering why they're experiencing states close to burnout or anxiety or have some phantom pain they can't explain. Could you say that the import of what you said is, I think, is really critical for people to understand?
Yeah. We have this primitive brain that when it's stressed, it goes into fight, flight, or freeze. When we were cavemen, the stressor was the saber-toothed tiger chasing us. But now, our stressors are information overload. Our stressors are conflict with a spouse. Our stressors are, forgetting your homework or a bully at school or your boss yelling at you. So these are our current day saber-toothed tigers that cause us to go into these stress states. And what we know is that by controlling our breath, by directing our breath in very specific ways, we can turn off that stress response in about 90 seconds. And we can turn on a relaxation response. And within our brain, essentially what that means is if we could turn off that stress response, what that does is it quiets the primitive parts of our brain, that reptilian reflexive brain. And when we elicit a relaxation response, it opens up access to our prefrontal cortex and our memory centers, and it calms down the emotional brain. So it gives us a greater capacity to think, to organize, to plan, to process, and really to recognize easeful, joyful feelings and states. So that's one piece of the science just about the breath, how breath helps redirect a stress response and turn it into a relaxation response. The science part about the movement is that we also know that when we're in a stress state, our body produces an excessive amount of cortisol and adrenaline. And it does that because these two hormones help us to go through that fight, flight, or freeze reactions. So the cortisol goes to the big muscles of our body, and it moves blood to the big muscles of our body so that we have the strength and the endurance to run quickly and run far, or to stop and to fight our way out of a threatening situation. But unfortunately, the cortisol and the adrenaline, when they are secreted because we're in our current day stress states of somebody's yelling at us, or we're caught in traffic, or we're upset about something, we don't really need to go into those fight, flight, or freeze states. So the cortisol and the adrenaline just sort of sit within our system, and we know that those hormones kill brain cells, specifically in the hippocampus, which is responsible for memories, for storing and retrieving memories. So we're able to use movement to help secrete helpful hormones that actually help our brain and help our body. So we secrete things like dopamine and serotonin and brain-derived neurotropic factor, which helps build brain cells and helps brain cells network together. So movement really does help learning when you just look at it through the changes in hormonal flow throughout our body. And then
I just want to jump in here.
Yeah.
You just said something that Christine talks about all the time. And so this is an example of a synchronicity, that forcing young children to sit still, Christine always talks about how unnatural that is.
Yeah,
and then,
terribly.
They're in a room, don't move, you can't do this, don't not know, and then with all this emphasis on the testing in some schools, they've even eliminated recess where the kids can't play. So imagine a child is in second grade and there's no recess, or that's in some schools that's how they punish the kids. They say, well, if you don't do this, then there's no recess. I remember when I was in school, that's one of the things they used. It was quite effective because that's a big part of learning. Play is actually an integral part of learning. And so I think on your website, I think I saw something where there was a picture of children in a classroom, and they weren't just sitting in chairs; they were sitting on those balls. Like, what's the name of that ball? The big ball.
Oh, the therapy balls?
The therapy balls that you would see in a Pilates class.
Yeah,
and
so you do have classrooms with kids that are on the balls, so at least they could wiggle and jiggle, they could bounce and get a little movement while they're still seated doing their work, which, quite honestly, there's lots of schools using those things right now. Personally, I think that
we're from New York, and we have never seen that in any school. I have never seen that.
Yeah, it's sort of a new thing that's been evolving over the last 5 years or so. I mean, we use them in therapy very, very often, but now classrooms are starting to have them more accessible for kids in general. I mean, quite honestly, I feel like those types of things are Band-Aids because what they really want the kids still to be able to do is sit there, pay attention, and write. And they're applying these things so at least that they get some movement while they're seated. But the reality is that kids need to run, they need to climb, they need to roll down grassy hills, they need to jump, they need to pull on rope, they need resistive activities. I mean, our bodies need to move in order to build brain structures and connections that support learning. That's bottom line. I think that the best resource for looking at those things are, the name of the book is Spark, and the name of the author is escaping me right now. I know that I'm going to think of it very, very quickly, but I mean, he really, the author really addresses the need to move and how taking kids' ability to move throughout the day is really impairing their ability to learn.
Well, that's very true. You know, I'll give you a great example. I was I had an after-school program one time, and I took the children on a trip, and we were going to the cloisters. So it was a very, very long bus ride, and they can't really move around in a bus ride for safety's sake, etc. So after the long bus ride, the driver thought that he couldn't drive up to the museum, so he stopped at the entrance to the park, which was a good thing. It was a very, very hot day. The children were sitting in the bus for over 30 minutes, so when they got out, they were running all over the park. Thank goodness I had quite a few adults with me. We were watching them. They took their time going through the park. I think it took us another 30 minutes to get to the museum, which was right there. But they were so tuckered out from running, jumping, cartwheeling, climbing on the rocks, and playing that by the time we got to the museum, they were exhausted. So all they could do was sit down and listen.
Yeah.
So they were perfect in the museum. And then we went back the same way. So it's exactly as you said. They had the chance to move, and that movement stillness was just what they needed to truly enjoy themselves and learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to jump in again here. I know I'm cutting you off, Allison, but I have good news. I have looked up Spark. It's called The Revolutionary New Science of Exercise in the Brain.
Right.
And the gentleman's name is John Ratey.
John Ratey.
R-A-T-E-Y. Yes.
Yeah.
And Eric Hagerman. So thank you for bringing this to my attention, our attention, and to for our audience, because I'm not familiar with this work, although I'm familiar with the concept, because Christine talks about this all the time, especially with her ideokinesis work, that is basically how to lift your mood and how the aerobic exercise changes, as you said, the brain beneficially.
Allison, I just want to ask you this one final question. In terms of the children learning this, what feedback have you gotten back from parents, if any, on how their children are behaving differently?
Oh, well, one of the funniest things that parents have said to me is that they found out initially that the kids were doing yoga and mindfulness in school because the kids go home and teach it to their parents.
Wonderful.
Which is really just incredible. So parents are absolutely thrilled to know that, number one, their kids are learning some self-coping skills. Number two, that the schools are addressing so many of the issues that parents know kids are faced with, that schools have just been sweeping under the rug for so long. And three, they're really impressed with the fact that their kids are not only learning these things, but they're learning them well enough to teach to others.
Wow.
And we talked before about how kids could be our best teachers. The reason why kids are more effective in teaching these tools than sometimes the adults are is because they immediately allow themselves to feel the effects of the practice. And it's all about cultivating ease and joy within the brain and the body. And who doesn't want more of that? So the
Definitely.
the kids have become master teachers of these things.
But Allison, you realize that what we're talking about, that this is a paradigmatic issue, because what you're talking about is ease and grace and answering the question that Dr. Maria Nemeth, who has been a guest on our show several times, she asked, would it be okay if your life got easier? And for some people, the answer to that question is not yes. And we've had many people say to us, oh, no, life is supposed to be hard. Relationships are supposed to be hard. Well, and the bottom line of my point, why I said it is an opposite paradigm. How many times have we heard the phrase "no pain, no gain"?
Yeah.
And you know, Allison, and Christine knows that pain is actually a warning sign from the body, right? From the nervous system. Yes. And so we know people who they've been exercising and they experience a pain, and then they go, let's push through, and then instead of having a minor energy, well, they just snapped their Achilles tendon or their hamstring popped.
Yeah.
So they felt the pain, but they didn't stop. And so I'm not going to get into the big issue here, but I just want to point out that what you're talking about, the ease, that the elevated relaxation response, when it's achieved at its highest level, it actually is done, it's on the hypo side. So it's the opposite of the hyper side. So kids, like with the accelerated learning, can learn more by doing less. It's just like how hypnosis works. Less effort results in a deeper trance, etc. So my point is that what you're talking about is that the children could easily teach their parents because they don't have any resistance to the learning. They go, hey, it's just like playing a game. I tried this, and I can throw the ball further. I can jump rope, do the double dutch faster. And so that's all it is. There's no thinking they just know it works, and then they're just repeating it. And so that's a good thing. So again, I want to thank you so much because you have said so many things, but as we wrap up the show, I just want to ask you if you could just cover very briefly. You already touched on it, but this is such a huge issue, not just in the schools, but throughout life. The issue of bullying, and especially cyberbullying now with the social media. What, in your view, could really go right to the heart to lessen this thing, because this is really, as you say, I can go on the internet right now and see cases where girls and boys have been bullied and they committed suicide. And then sometimes the person who was the bully, they don't even have to have remorse after the person dies. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. It really, really does come down to compassion, kindness, and empathy. And when you get to a state where there is bullying going on, the bully and the individual being bullied, it's these three key things that are missing there. Compassion, self-compassion, compassion to others, kindness to self and to others, and empathy. When those three components are missing, that's when bullying steps in. And the thing is that those three things can be taught. They can be taught. So rather than developing these anti-bullying programs that really are not that effective, because they're usually pushed through in schools through character education, and they rely on having kids sitting through lectures and assemblies and giving them cognitive ideas and rules and consequences and punishments, and they're not going to have a strong effect on students who are feeling aggressive or lonely or agitated or stressed. They're really not, or kids that are experiencing trauma sometimes. So a program that that'll address bullying looks at all the factors that lead to the behavior of bullying or lead to the behavior of being bullied. And it really comes down to teaching compassion, kindness, and empathy, which is why yoga and mindfulness are such powerful tools, because that's what we teach and really helps the kids become better able to access these skills for themselves and for others.
Well, Allison, we were fortunate enough to have a woman named Sharon Lynn Wyeth on our show, and she talks about the power of names and your name begins with A, and A is very practical. You have given our listeners and us just an amazing lay of the land in terms of going right to causation. And I just want to say the first three letters of your name say all.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for being our featured guest today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It really was really wonderful to engage in this conversation with both of you.
Thank you, Allison. We truly enjoyed it, and I think our audience gained a great deal from your practical application of this work. And I just want to say, on behalf of Bob and myself, thank you for the extraordinary work that you're doing and the practices that you're bringing to children and to education. I think it's truly wonderful. Allison, would you let our audience know how they can reach you should they want to learn more about your program, or perhaps there's an educator or someone who would like to hire you right now listening?
Sure. The best way is through my website, which is www.zensationalkids.com. And through the website, you'd have access to my email, so you could directly email me, Allison@zensationalkids.com, and you'll have access to my phone number as well, so you can always give me a call.
Okay, wonderful. So, audience, you can take a look at Allison's work on her website, Zensational Kids, ZensationalKids, Zensationalkids.com. You can email Allison there, call her, and she is also on Facebook at Zensational Kids. So please take a look at her work, and if you'd like to engage her, just contact her.
Allison, what final thoughts or key ideas would you like our audience to take away from today's broadcast?
I would say the biggest thing is to truly define well-being for yourself and for your children, because well-being is really where health resides. It's where joy resides. It's the heart of all learning and living, and our purpose is to have greater joy and more ease. And we live in a society that has sacrificed our own well-being for higher pay, higher grades, getting more done, and now we're just seeing a lot more suffering and pain, especially in schools, especially with our kids. So the time has come that we need to take a step back and define what well-being means for each of us and cultivate ways to bring that into our life on a daily basis.
Wonderful, Allison. Thank you so much for being our featured guest. I know our audience has enjoyed having you and listening to your message. So, audience, I want to thank you for listening, and I want to thank you again, Allison, for being our featured guest today. And listeners, wherever you are in the world listening to this, in whatever time zone, we want to remind you just how much we appreciate your presence, and we trust that you have received some unique benefit from the information that we delivered on today's show. As always, we look forward to receiving your comments about our show. Please let us know if there are any additional topics you'd like us to cover, or if there's a guest like Allison you enjoy having us invite back. Please contact us through our website with your feedback and suggestions. Remember, listeners, if you'd like to experience the same benefits our coaching clients get with us, including learning how you can get more results in your day and easy ways to dissolve your chronic pain, stress, and anxiety, then give us a call at 954-900-2179. Mention that you heard our Learn to Live Stress-Free podcast show, and you'll receive a free gift from us. Call us today to schedule your appointment. For Christine Wright, this is Dr. Robert Wright, Jr. of StressFreeNow.info. Until next time, be safe and be well.